Fictional scenario: The Day America Stood Still. This story is entirely fictional. It is not based on actual events or intelligence reporting. It is a preparedness thought exercise imagining the consequences of a large-scale coordinated terrorist attack. 6:47 a.m. Eastern Time. It began without warning. Most Americans would never know that attacks had already begun before they poured their first cup of coffee. In several states, small teams quietly moved into position near electrical infrastructure. Others blended into morning commuters. Some waited near transportation hubs. Still others prepared cyber attacks that would begin at precisely the same moment. Nobody watching the morning news suspected anything unusual. 7:03 a.m. The first explosions were reported. A major electrical substation outside Los Angeles erupted into flames. Minutes later, another outside Charlotte, North Carolina. Then another in Portland, Maine. Emergency dispatchers initially believed they were isolated equipment failures within their respective sites. They were wrong. Within minutes, similar reports arrived from multiple states across the country. Arizona, Illinois, Georgia, Virginia, Texas, Florida, New York. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Then came the cyber attack. Electrical utilities across several regions suddenly lost visibility into portions of their networks. Communication between control centers became unreliable at best. Protective systems shut portions of the grid down to prevent even larger failures. Entire counties went dark. Traffic signals failed. Fuel pumps stopped working. Internet service became intermittent. Cell towers began operating on backup power. At 7:26 a.m., the attacks changed. Gunfire erupted inside crowded public areas in several cities, including Seattle, Chicago, Boston, New York City, and Philadelphia. Schools, malls, grocery stores, soft targets. In each city, the story was the same. People ran. Businesses locked their doors. Parents desperately tried reaching children at schools. Emergency dispatch centers became overwhelmed almost immediately. Calls poured in faster than operators could answer them. Nobody knew where the next attack would happen. By 8 a.m., America understood this wasn't one attack. It was dozens, perhaps hundreds. The goal wasn't simply destruction. The goal was confusion, fear, panic. To stretch emergency responders so thin that no city could respond fast enough. Police officers raced from call to call with almost no reliable information. Fire departments struggled to reach burning infrastructure because highways had become gridlocked. Ambulances found themselves trapped in miles of stopped traffic created by failed intersections. Then came another shock. Several major bridges had been intentionally damaged. Some remained standing but were declared unsafe. Others partially collapsed after carefully placed explosives weakened critical supports. Entire interstate corridors closed within minutes. Commercial trucking ground to a halt. Rail traffic stopped in several regions. Cargo shipments immediately began rerouting hundreds of miles around damaged transportation corridors. Nobody realized it then, but those bridges would not reopen for years. Throughout the morning, Americans watched live television trying to understand what was happening. Businesses across the country closed as workers made the decision to go home to be with their families. News reports constantly changed. Some were accurate. Many were rumors. False reports spread across social media faster than verified information. A surprising development. There was a segment of the population that actually cheered on the terrorists. They posted that the evil capitalists, the evil colonialists, and nationalists are finally getting what is coming to them. Insanity. People flooded grocery stores, gas stations, pharmacies, anything still open. Within hours, shelves were empty. Not because America had run out of food, but because millions of people tried buying several weeks' worth of supplies in a single afternoon. Some communities fought back. In parts of Texas and some other areas, armed citizens helped stop attacks before additional lives were lost. Stories of attackers being confronted almost immediately after opening fire were many. In a Tractor Supply parking lot near Athens, Georgia, a man jumped out of his truck, drew his HK 9mm pistol, and engaged two terrorists as they opened fire into the shopping complex. Both terrorists received multiple rounds of 124-grain 9mm in response to their actions. Florida experienced similar incidents. South Carolina saw multiple examples of ordinary people stepping forward to help neighbors, render aid, and assist responding officers during chaotic situations. Having an armed populace in many states paid off by saving lives. Other communities weren't as fortunate. Emergency services simply could not be everywhere at once. Law enforcement already committed to one attack couldn't instantly respond to another several miles away. Hospitals activated mass casualty procedures. Medical helicopters remained airborne almost continuously. National Guard units began mobilizing before noon. By early afternoon, the power situation became worse. Backup generators began failing. Fuel deliveries couldn't reach some locations because transportation routes had been severed. Water treatment facilities struggled to maintain pressure. Refrigerators slowly warmed. Freezers thawed. Families watched hundreds of dollars worth of food spoil. Grocery stores that still had power found themselves unable to restock because delivery trucks were trapped behind damaged transportation routes. Distribution warehouses sat filled with food, while empty shelves sat hundreds of miles away. The economic consequences began almost immediately. With several major transportation routes closed indefinitely, shipping companies rerouted freight across already crowded highways. Travel times increased dramatically. Shipping costs surged. Over the next week, state and federal law enforcement hunted down remaining terrorists and those who aided them. There were calls from the populace to do something, anything to prevent future attacks. Suddenly, border security and the right to keep and bear arms became important to people who once wanted both eliminated. A true awakening began to occur within the United States to prioritize border security as well as controlled immigration with a priority on value compatibility. Food, building materials, household supplies, firearms, ammunition, everything transported by truck became more expensive. Over the next few weeks, state and federal law enforcement hunted down remaining terrorists and those who aided them. There were calls from the populace to do something, anything, to prevent future attacks. Suddenly, border security and the right to keep and bear arms became important to people who once wanted both eliminated. A true awakening began to occur within the United States to prioritize border security as well as controlled immigration, with a priority on value compatibility. Months later, certain shortages still hadn't recovered. Insurance companies estimated damage in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Entire bridge replacement projects would require years of engineering, environmental review, and construction. Businesses located along damaged transportation corridors closed permanently. Manufacturers struggled to get parts. Farmers struggled to get food shipped to their destination. Ports became congested as freight bottlenecked across the country. The attack had lasted one day, one single day. Its consequences would be measured in years. Investigators eventually concluded that the physical damage alone was only part of the objective. Interrupt commerce, disrupt infrastructure, create fear, murder. They forced Americans to question whether daily life was truly secure. In that regard, the attacks changed the country almost overnight. Critical infrastructure received permanent security upgrades. Utilities redesigned portions of the electrical grid. Transportation agencies hardened bridges and tunnels. Cybersecurity spending increased dramatically. Local communities invested in emergency preparedness. Hospitals expanded disaster planning. Businesses developed continuity plans they had never before considered necessary. A congressional investigation determined over 50,000 people were killed as a result of the attacks, and close to 6,400 people were directly or indirectly involved in carrying out the atrocities. Years later, many of the damaged bridges had finally reopened. Some communities had recovered. Others never fully did. There was a mass exodus from the heavily populated areas. Many realized that living a more peaceful, simple, and traditional life was a better way to live. People still remembered the empty grocery shelves, the powerless neighborhoods, the traffic that stretched for miles, the uncertainty, not knowing what was happening or what might happen next. A growing majority of the population also remembered the government that let them down. They remembered the broken promises and the open borders for decades that allowed sleeper cells to enter the country in such numbers. After the dust settled and people began to realize not only the full scope, but the truth of what occurred, protests and mass demonstrations spread across the country. The people demanded changes, major changes. For the first time in many years, the government began to actually fear the citizens. The question remains today. Will there be another attack? Will those across the planet that hate us reach out once again and strike? Will you be ready?